lack of the hidden rules. Jerry Williams, Director of the Library Downtown Campus. This is Rhonda Orman, and what is she has a new position now?
I'm in training in HR department.
So you'll notice my name is not actually on the screen. Although I'm involved in the under-resourced student material, this session was originally developed by Sandra Chambers and Laura Smith, correct? Sandra and you, okay. And Laura, being the Dean of Students, it is certainly involved in the disciplinary issues. And so anyway, what happened was that Sandra had an emergency this morning. She had to leave. And Laura is apparently the only member of the ATD steering team who is here for the third ATD session today. So I am filling in. So bear with me because I'm going to use notes. The reason that I actually volunteered to Rhonda to participate in this is because is it disciplinary or lack of knowledge of the hidden rules? So anyone who knows anything about the library, or certainly anyone who's worked in the library, understands that we are one of the pipelines to Sandra's office because of disciplinary issues. We don't have students whom we deal with 2 days a week or 3 days a week, but we have thousands of students whom we deal with on one incident kind of issues. So I said, well, I think I can at least do the first part here, and then I'll turn it over to Rhonda. So our goals here are to empower faculty and staff to solve low-level conflicts before it escalates to disciplinary action. And, you know, in the library, a lot of times I'm not the person out there on the front line, but I see how we interact often determines if it's going to escalate or if it's going to dispel the issue and, you know, calm everyone down and they can move on. Another goal is confidence to assess the situations, conducting referral for disciplinary action or classroom management utilizing knowledge about the hidden rules. We can't necessarily assume that our staff or faculty have the information that to actually handle these situations in a way that won't lead to disciplinary action if we're looking at this in the context of hidden rules. You know, perhaps it's not that the student is just difficult, perhaps they really don't understand, or they are from a different world where it's, you know, different driving forces. And so the more that we learn, then we can begin to build confidence to handle these situations differently. And finally, the focus in all of this is, yes, we want to maintain order and, you know, decrease chaos, but in the end, through retaining that student and having that student reach their goals, you know, sometimes it seems easier. I know I had a class a few years ago and I thought, man, I could just have a class minus those 2 students. It'd be a whole new world, but that's not what it's about. Oh, I'm so sorry. So if we look at the types of behavior in this pyramid, I think based on what I've heard from Sandra, and from Laura, and what I've seen happen in the library sometimes, things that are really just annoying or maybe make folks a little bit uncomfortable end up in the dean's office or in Sandra's office to deal with, when in actuality, if we had better strategies for dealing with those incidents, then they don't necessarily need to escalate to that level. Sometimes they move, you know, beyond the annoying and the uncomfortable into the disruptive, but again, are we escalating or do we have the strategies, the tools, and the knowledge of perhaps what is happening with the student that creates that kind of disruptive behavior so that we can move things in the other direction as opposed to sending them up to the dean's office. And then finally, do we understand the difference between the annoying and the causing discomfort, the disruptive, and then those things that truly are threatening, where there's no question those are the issues that need to be sent up. And please, Rhonda, jump in if...
The comment that I would make on that is every time we send something up to threatening and it goes to student affairs, we have decreased the likelihood of retaining that student and that student completing. There are times certainly when that's necessary. The behavior warrants it going directly up there. But we need to solve it at the lowest level possible if we are going to support that completion agenda and that retention agenda. So that's the whole point behind all of this.
Okay, so if we look at this spectrum of behaviors, and we have all, I would suspect, interacted with students along the spectrum. Sometimes whether in the classroom or if I think about being in the library, there are behaviors that I think that is really odd. Odd though, we can deal with that. Perhaps it's odd to me because I, being from a solid middle class background, don't understand why I have a student who is behaving in the way that he or she is behaving. Why is it that, just in looking at the success things we talked about earlier, you have a student who's doing really well, and then the odd thing is they don't show up for the test. That's odd. It's not disruptive because they're not there, but I don't necessarily understand why. Sometimes it's annoying. Maybe the students who are talking because they don't understand that in the classroom, in that part of the class, it's not appropriate to talk, or in the library, that they are doing something that I consider annoying, but it's really not disruptive or threatening or further along the spectrum. Uncivil, they don't necessarily understand, if you've been in the other sessions about the hidden rules, what seems rude to me, it's not necessarily that it's rude, but perhaps it's the casual language register, because they don't understand yet that in higher ed that it's a different language register. It's the formal register. So things that they say may seem uncivil or rude, and it's actually that they don't understand the culture of higher ed. Uncomfortable, but all of those things, if we can develop the strategies to address those ourselves, then as Rhonda says, we're not escalating that up to the dean's office where suddenly the likelihood that they're going to disappear increases. And so one of the things here is to really understand at what point do we need to refer, and what things do we need to address ourselves. So I'm going to turn it over to Rhonda, because obviously she's the one who was involved with Sandra in creating this, and this started me thinking. I unfortunately did not get to sit in on this session when they did this before, but I've begun to think about in the library, because we have lots of interactions with students, and as I said, some that escalate and are sent to the dean's office about something really silly. Case in point, last year, I had an encounter with a student about a fast food cup in the building, which in the end of the encounter sent her to the dean's office. I mean, it was really stupid, but it's one of our policies in the library, and it was an encounter that I didn't handle very well. So I'm thinking, what kind of training can we do in the library, for example, when we are dealing with students at the front lines to more successfully handle the lower end of the spectrum kind of conflicts so that we don't send things up which then can have a negative impact in terms of retention and student success. Wired for sound. Yeah.
By the way, in case you're wondering, I talk pretty loud. I don't really need this mic, but we are recording this session for folks to view later, maybe that couldn't be here, adjunct faculty or faculty or staff that couldn't be here. So thus the camera and the mic. So let's talk first about what really is disruptive and threatening. What needs to be escalated up? What do you not need to think about? This is way inappropriate. It needs to go to the next level. Fear of violence, concern for personal safety, concern about the student harming themselves or others. Well, let's think about that for a minute. I might be triggered and feel a fear of violence by something that really isn't violent because of my own life experiences. Okay, so it's going to be really important for you to think about what are your own triggers. Okay, I talk loud now because my hearing, as I get older, is going down. And when I'm trying to explain something, I really talk loud, which isn't so great for training, but I'm working on that. But I have a fear of people that talk really loud. So I'm on alert when that's happening. I was the mentor to a Changemaker student that came into my office on 2 or 3 different occasions, and we were discussing, she talked really loud all the time and talked really fast like this. And it alarmed me. Even though she never was threatening to me. She never said anything. She never did anything that was outright threatening to me. My heart would just pound when she would talk. I worked in the suite where security, Chris Carter, the director of security, his house, and he walked by my office where behind, there was glass there. She had her back to him, and he's like, do you need help? And, I'm kind of like, okay. But I know that I need to be careful about labeling that as real threatening behavior because I have a trigger here for loud voices, okay? It's important to understand that threatening behavior is different than feeling uncomfortable. It is different than feeling annoyed. It is different than feeling irritated, okay? So what is threatening behavior? Acts of physical aggression, threats of violence, students articulating depression, hopelessness, mention of weapons to solve problems, any kind of reports of abuse. No brainer, don't try to solve it. Send it up the chain of command, okay? So now we're going to spend the rest of our time on this part. The yellow part and the gray part. The lack of knowledge of hidden rules. Students can be odd, they can be creepy, they can have a criminal record, they can have different opinions than you. They can challenge you. They can challenge your opinion. That doesn't necessarily equate to challenging your expertise in the field, okay? They can challenge your opinion. They might have a different opinion. Betty, I'm going to give the example of someone that talked to me, had Betty in class. They were the student in class and didn't agree with the grade, challenged that grade. Went in, they had done some research on the topic. They arrived at a different conclusion. Betty wound up, really respecting that student. The grade got changed. The student still remembers that 2 years later. So, they can challenge you, but it can be handled in a way that is not seen as challenging your authority in the classroom. So, it's important in these kinds of behavior, odd, annoying, uncivil, uncomfortable, you should expect to feel uncomfortable, whether you're faculty or your staff. You should expect, with the audience we have at Jefferson, that you're going to feel uncomfortable sometimes. Okay, that's who we are. We're an open access community college with our largest campus in an urban setting. So if you don't come from that environment, you should probably expect to feel uncomfortable sometimes.
And we have, as Dr. Newton mentioned this morning, how many different countries and cultures represented in our student population?
98 countries. That's a lot. So what is some annoying, uncomfortable behavior? You can see this woman here looks a little uncomfortable. Have you ever felt like that? If I just act like they're not here, if I pretend I don't see it, it will go away.
And this guy seems pretty comfortable. Now, obviously, it would be inappropriate for students to come dressed like that, or with the Darth Vader, mask on. But he seems pretty relaxed and pretty comfortable with himself. Obviously, an extreme example. Students can use inappropriate behavior, but remember, if you were in any of the earlier sessions, a driving force of generational poverty is entertainment. Okay? Entertainment is used as a coping mechanism for stress. If you're living in generational poverty, you're not planning your entertainment. Your entertainment is what helps you get to the next day. Okay? So they're used to using inappropriate humor, and in poverty, humor is about sex and people. Okay? In middle class, it's about situations. Students might interrupt or ask a lot of questions. TMI, too much information. They come in and say, oh, I'm late for class because I had to go to my gynecologist, and and they go on and on and on. And you're like, whoa, okay. Maybe they do that because you have expressed an interest in them, you've developed a friendship, you've become friendly with them. Doesn't mean you're friends from where you stand, but if your driving force is relationships, that's how you're interpreting that. Okay, so the student might very well give you too much information. It's an Now, we are not saying make the exception. We're not saying have so much sympathy and empathy that you let them go on and on. It's an opportunity for us to provide that transition that Terry O'Bannon just talked about to a professional environment. What's acceptable in one environment is not always acceptable in the other environment. Okay? I appreciate your notifying me and letting me know, but I really, in a professional setting, it's not needed to offer that kind of information. Okay? Just let me know you're going to be late. Unawareness of social cues. I told this story when we did this session during Jefferson Weeks. I was in a class. So I want you to understand this is not a phenomenon that is unique to Jefferson. It happens everywhere. I was in a class at U of L last summer, and a small class, about 15 students, so we always sat in a circle, and that's how we did our work with the instructor. And there was a young man in there that came in class, summertime, he's wearing sandals, and from probably the third class on, the class only lasted, it was a shorter class, so it didn't run the normal 16 weeks. But it probably ran 10 weeks. And probably from class 3 on, he would groom his toenails in class. I found that uncomfortable. I found it disruptive. It distracted me from the topic at hand. Now, I don't know if the instructor ever talked to him about it. It never stopped. And I remember at one point I turned my chair. And I always scanned the room when I walked in so I did not have to sit close to him so that I could pair up with somebody else when we did that kind of work. I don't know if the instructor ever said anything to him. If he did, it didn't work. Okay, so that's getting into that gray area, but it's an unawareness of social cues. Do I think that student, that young man, came into class thinking, that woman over there, she thinks she knows it all, and I'm going to offend her. I'm going to pick my toenails. He probably didn't think that. He probably just came into class, and that's what he's used to doing, and he wasn't aware. Had I been the instructor, I would have asked to see him after class. And I would have said to him, I am sure that you do not mean any disrespect, but I'm going to ask you not to groom your toenails in class because it can be disruptive to the other students. I'm going to say it in a way that doesn't judge him, that doesn't assume that he's stupid. Okay? Students can stare for a long time. And that can make you really uncomfortable. But is it threatening? Might be. But you can, again, say to them, they don't know if they don't know. You don't know what you don't know. So it's important to let them know, I feel uncomfortable when you stare at me for such a long period of time. It's good to make eye contact. That's considered professional. 50% of the time you should be making eye contact with your audience. But to continue to stare at someone is considered offensive. Okay? They might be just so incredibly interested in what you're saying that they can't take their eyes off of you. We've talked a lot about the casual register in some of the other sessions, and that can really come across as disrespectful and rude. Example we used in one of the earlier sessions that was a real case in the library is a student came up and threw the piece of paper or whatever it is on the counter and said, "Fix my password." it can be an opportunity to let them know, I'll be happy to help you with your password. But in a professional setting such as a college library, it's expected that you will frame requests as questions, not demands. Okay? You don't assume they meant ill intent. They can invade your personal space and boundaries. And again, it's an opportunity. So those of you that were here, you heard the story about the student who came up and helped Barbara Ashley clean the chalk off of her behind. You know, that person didn't mean to offend Barbara, didn't have any clue that they were doing that. Okay? She thought they had developed a friendship. So it's important to help them understand a professional, friendly relationship does not equal friendship. And that professional relationships have a greater distance than more intimate friendship relationships. Use of cell phone and email. They can be using that stuff in class, can be very, very annoying. It can be interpreted as lack of engagement, disinterest. So let's talk about this gray area for a little bit. And what does that look like? This is where it's getting a little dicier. And it gets a little harder to know, do I escalate this? Or can I move this back down into the yellow area and hopefully increase the likelihood of retaining this student? When they interrupt teaching and learning on a regular basis, you're getting into some shaky ground there. You know, because your role as the instructor is to utilize that time for all the students. There can be a no response or a slow response to interventions. The student that was grooming his toenails was disrupting my class, my ability to focus. So let's say the instructor did talk to him. The student clearly didn't stop the behavior. Maybe he says something to him again. I just want to make sure that I'm clear with you. This behavior needs to stop. I realize you may not mean any harm or you may not mean to distract, but it is distracting. Keeps doing it. There's clearly no response. Problem may need to be escalated at that point. The student needs to be clear that that's what's going to happen. If I don't see a change in behavior, I'll have to escalate this. Okay? But that's a lot different than just not wanting to deal with it and escalating it from the very beginning. Yelling, being excessively loud, that can distract other students, talking with them a lot. We've talked about that before. Again, think about the driving force in generational poverty as relationships. You know, it was interesting, Terry O'Bannon put the very first thing up there. Students make a significant connection to another person on campus. First thing I thought of was the driving force of relationships. Why is that so important? You know, it's important because that's what they build their lives around. They have not built, you know, if you're living in that tyranny of the moment, and you're not building your life, you're not defining success by work and achievement. Clearly, I've described the excessive hygiene. When do you escalate it to student affairs? First, you apply the reasonable person standard. If you immediately go to the place where you're thinking, oh, I need to escalate this is threatening, and it's not one of those earlier things we talked about, I would encourage you, before you send that student to student affairs, that you call Sandra or Laura. Tell them the situation. Talk it through with them. It really might not be that. But the student doesn't have to know that you're talking about that yet. Okay? They might give you some tools that you can deal with it. I use this example. When I really want an objective view, and let's say I'm mad at my spouse, I don't go to my best friend. Because, you know, when I'm really mad at him and all I want to do is talk about my husband, if he's done something that I don't like, I'm going to go to my best friend because she's going to say, you know what, I agree, he should be shot. You know? And I need that. At that moment, I need that. But when I really want an objective view, maybe with my teenage daughter, and I'm thinking, you know, I'm not real keen on her going to this party or maybe on this trip. But she's given me lots of reasons, and maybe I'll go to somebody else who's already had teens and successfully moved them on into adulthood, and I might talk it through with them. You know, I'm probably not going to go to somebody that's just going to reinforce it if I really want an objective view. So use that reasonable person standard before you act on it. Know your own triggers. And if it is significant, ongoing, and documentable, obviously you're going to have to escalate it. Okay, if you have tried to deal with it and you are not getting any response from that student, escalate it. So your response options are, you can ignore it, you can pretend it's not happening, you can refer it immediately to student affairs, You can remove the student from class. You can do nothing because you don't want to upset the student, because you have lots of sympathy for that student and you really don't want to embarrass them. What is all that support? Those are options that you have. But those, at a minimum, at a bare minimum, the behavior is probably going to continue. And it very likely is going to escalate because the student getting the message, it's okay to do this. It's one of the examples we used in Voices is a student brings in loud food, you know, like chips or some kind of bag that makes a lot of noise, and maybe you allow food in your class, but you don't want loud food. You know, you want quiet food. There is such a thing, you know, soft chocolate chip cookies are very, very quiet and comforting and filling for a short time. So you want to be careful about choosing these. These are options for you. You can certainly do them. But ask yourself, if I choose to do this, because, you know, especially if it starts happening, say the student's been great and you're getting into the last month of class. You think, I just got 3 more weeks to go. I can make it through 3 more weeks. Maybe you can. But what have you done for that student? Okay, you've missed an opportunity to help that student transition into being successful in a different kind of environment. And if you let it go at the beginning of class, you are really setting that student up for less likelihood for success throughout the semester. Because the longer you go, if you're like most people, you could be the exception. The longer you let it go, the more it irritates you. Okay, so that when you do finally address it, you know, we're usually really angry about it. Okay. Rebecca Cox talks in her book, College Fear Factor, about, in her interviews with students, they talked about how absolutely and utterly confusing it was that when they went to college, every professor had a different set of standards. Not just academically, but in the rules of the classroom. Now, I'm not suggesting we make those uniform, but I am suggesting that it helps you understand why a student can be confused and why they might need to be reminded of what is appropriate for your classroom. So some other options that you have that would support retention and completion are, you know, allow yourself to be uncomfortable. Allow yourself to be irritated. Maybe not in front of the student. Find a safe place and just allow yourself to feel that emotion. It's okay. Expect to feel uncomfortable. Expect to feel irritated. Allow yourself to begin to build a bridging relationship with that student. You are in a unique position, whether you are faculty or staff, to begin to help that student have access to resources that they don't currently have access to, or probably most of the people around them don't have access to. And one of those big ones is the knowledge of hidden rules. Information is power. So teach those hidden rules. For everything else, document it, report it, and get assistance. Okay? But I encourage you, if you feel like you're at your wit's end, but you're not 100% sure that it's threatening, it's not one of those first things, you know, contact Student Affairs. Contact Laura, Denise, Sandra, and talk it through. Maybe it really does need to be escalated, but maybe it doesn't. So ask yourself, is there immediate or imminent danger? Is there a threat of possible violence? And if I ignore this, what's going to happen? We support retention and completion when we solve it at the lowest level possible. So what are some prevention strategies you can use? I love this little cat here. He doesn't look very happy though. The quote says, I don't know if you can read it, it says, misunderstanding. I ask you to do it, but that's not what I wanted. Okay. So I have 3 cats, and sometimes I've recently gotten 2 new puppies, and my kitties are not happy. They're all adult cats, and we added 2 new puppies, and the puppies just think the cats are all that, you know, so they want to be around them all the time, and the cats are like, dude, way too close. You know, you need to back off. And so one of my cats has become so anxiety ridden that she has quit grooming herself. And so she started developing some hairballs. So I told my daughter we're going to have to shave her. This is what my daughter thought we were going to do. And I said, no, we just have to cut these little hairballs out of her. You know, these little knots where they start accumulating. So I kind of like that because it's pertinent to me. What can you do to prevent some of these behaviors from escalating? Discuss your expectations and consequences in the syllabus. And I know many, many instructors are doing that now. You're not just handing it to them and expecting them to read it. But go through it step by step, and I know you're doing that. Do it more than once. Pull it out several times in the semester and talk about it. On page 6, I talk about this. Remind them again in 3 weeks if it's becoming a problem, okay? Think about this with paper. Help the student understand that that syllabus is like currency for them. It's valuable for them to be successful in their class. And this can be for staff too when you're giving them information about financial aid or any of those kind of documents. When you think about the value of paper and the time horizon, in generational poverty, well, let me start with middle class. In middle class, the paper that you're going to have in your household are things like insurance policies, that you're going to keep. They're important. You might have wills. You're going to have documents like that, immunization certificates and stuff like that. Future-oriented. Those are future-oriented documents. When you are living in generational poverty, you might not have any insurance policies. You might not have a will. You're not going to have some of that paper. The paper they're concerned with is the green kind. Okay? Because that contributes to their survival on a daily basis. Help them understand the value of paper and what that means for them. Relate it to the green paper, money. This is like money for you if you use it in the classroom in the appropriate way in this class. Don't assume social media knowledge equals tech savvy. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, they're on their phones all the time, but they can't go find a research paper. Think about it this way. How much money are some of these Twitter and Facebook and all these places? They're putting enormous amounts of money in to make those platforms intuitive. Okay, and we live in an entertainment world. We're not doing that when we say, go find 2 peer-reviewed articles for this paper. Okay, they don't know what that means. Empirical data, they might not know what that means. Don't assume they know all work should be typed and not handwritten. That sounds like the most ridiculous thing I could say to a group of college setting. But if you don't know, you don't know. Professional relationships, friendly does not equal friends. And I said this in the earlier session. If I were an instructor and I come in on the first day of class, I would say to them, I expect to develop a friendly professional relationship with all of you. I hope I will learn all of your names. It does not mean I will ever be friends with any of you. Help them understand that you are an ally for them. It does not mean friends. Okay? Because when relationships are the driving force, it's really easy to confuse that. And it's helpful to know that there are different kinds of those relationships. Define what constitutes disruption for you. Okay? If I'm in the classroom and eating is just no good for me, really explicitly define that. Think about what your triggers are. If arriving late is that, make it really explicit for them. Let them know. If you're going to participate in class, I expect you to raise your hand. Or if it's okay to talk. But make all that very, very explicit. Don't just put it in the syllabus and expect them to read it. So you can begin to start to teach those hidden rules. And the thing I talk about with the syllabus is, I know instructors cover that on the first day. And I used this example in the last session. But if you're traveling in your job and you get an email next week from Tanique Santos that says the travel procedures have changed and you don't travel till November, are you necessarily going to remember that? Okay, we need to hold ourselves to the same standard that we're holding our students. Okay, they might not remember either, especially if those rules are changing in each of the classes they're going to. Okay. I would encourage you not just to talk about the student code of conduct. I would have a copy of it and I would hold it up on a regular basis, and let students know this again is currency for you. This is a really valuable document if you want to be successful and complete, and you can. Help the student. Rebecca Cox talks about that throughout her entire book. Help the student understand they deserve to be there and that they can learn. Okay, is that going to apply to every single student? Probably not. But it probably applies to a lot more than we're currently applying it to.
Laura sent these brochures, which I'd never seen before, where the Article 3 non-academic disciplinary policies and procedures from the Code of Student Conduct have been pulled out, so I will send them around.
The other thing you can do is really help students understand what the process is for correcting behavior. You know, I think about that class at U of L, and I think what would have happened, what would that young man have done differently? Maybe nothing, but maybe he would have changed his behavior. If the instructor had said on the first day of class, you know, if we have any disruptive behavior, distracting behavior that happens throughout the semester, this is how I'm going to handle it. I might say in the middle of class, that humor is inappropriate. And during class, what I value is your ability to develop your cognitive skills. So I might do it in the class. I might ask you to stay after class and talk to me if there's something that you do that I feel is disruptive or distracting. I might ask you to stay. There could be lots of other reasons I could ask to see you after class too, so that students don't feel that anybody that's asked to stay are targeted for that reason. If I've done that and you continue with the behavior, you need to know that I'm going to escalate that to student affairs. And you need to understand, if you choose not to respond to the information I'm giving you, if you choose not to respond, then you are choosing to decrease the likelihood of your success in this class. However, if you choose to respond to the information I'm giving you, you are choosing to increase the likelihood that you will finish this class successfully and you will move on to the next level. Okay? I'm not judging their choice. I'm giving them lots of information. Okay? How can you provide this bridging relationship? I don't know if you guys can read this. This little guy down here is drowning. And he says, it's deep. And this guy up here says, no, it's not. So we can develop these bridging relationships by, one thing we can do is learn and use those students' names. Terry O'Bannon talked about that. Driving force of relationships. We can show interest in the students and not just the discipline. And if you're a staff person, please know this applies to you too. You are a subject matter expert in whatever you do. You're a subject matter expert in financial aid. You might be a subject matter expert in filling out new hire paperwork for student workers. You might be a subject matter expert in the admissions procedure. It's no longer enough, not with the audience that we have. It's no longer enough to be a subject matter expert. You have to develop the skill set to be able to convey that to, and I use this term cautiously, but I'm going to use it because I think it communicates my point. You have to be able to convey that information to an alien, someone who doesn't have a clue what you're talking about. Okay? So imagine someone coming from another world, coming in and they want to apply to Jefferson. Never even heard of any of that stuff before. How would you explain it to that person? Okay? That's part of being, that's part of our job now. If we are going to support retention and completion. View yourself through the student lens. And again, that goes, whoops. Well, I am really messing it up here. It goes back to this guy. This is what the student might be seeing. This is what you're seeing. How do you think this little guy, what do you think he thinks about this guy now? Because he's like up here, water's here, and the guy's saying it's not deep. You know, so view yourself and what you're saying to the student through their lens. You might be saying, you can do this, write the paper. You can do this. And that feels supportive from our point of view. But help the student understand how to do it. Okay, help give them some explicit information and help them understand that. Manage your own personal triggers. We all have them. No one's exempt from that. Manage your own personal triggers. And respect, as we talked in the first session, means look again. And it means that when this is the issue. When individuals don't have control over their resources, they are overly concerned with fairness. But here's the great news. Respect trumps fairness. Respect always trumps fairness. If you can communicate to the student the information that you need to communicate to them, might not be information they want to hear. But if you do that in a respectful way, it trumps the fairness card. Okay? And you will get more investment by the students. Yes, Sherry?
Just to jump in here for a minute, for those of you who are not in the classroom, as Terry O'Banion said a little bit ago, making that connection, showing interest in students. I have a part-time person, and she's in this room today, Vanessa Coleman. She spent a lot of last year at that new front desk in the downtown library. A lot of our interactions were, this is the way to the bathroom. But what I have heard over and over and over, I've heard things about how, Vanessa's so nice. Was at that front desk. Where's Vanessa today? Now, Vanessa has nothing to do with their classes. She's a reference librarian, so if they need help, she might be the one who's helping them with that. But the powerful thing is, so many of those students simply made that connection. And it didn't have anything to do with really what her real job is. I think that's such a powerful opportunity for every single person. I think of Stuart in the parking lot downtown, So that's something, as Terry O'Banion said, we can all do.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I've tried to get in the habit of doing is when I see a student get on the elevator, I'm in the JEC building, and they look overwhelmed or confused. I'll ask them, are you a student here? Yeah. I'll say, is there something I can help you with? You look like you might be a little confused. It is amazing how you will see the fear factor go down. Just relief. Can I fix their problem? 99% of the time, probably 100% of the time, no. But I've offered a friendly face. I can go in and make a couple phone calls. I might not know the person to contact, but I know somebody to contact that might know the answer. I can take just a little bit of time. And that helps retain them to the next time they need to come back. We're doing it each time. We're trying to get them to come back. So, respect trumps fairness. So, using the adult voice, we practiced this in the last session. The adult voice of negotiation is a win-win. You'll recall the child voice is the victim voice, irresponsible voice. It's not my fault that this happened to me. And that's right in line with the hidden rules of destiny, with generational poverty, and the hidden rules with middle class. So we can do that through the adult voice of negotiation by focusing on retention and completion, seeking to understand and addressing the problem as soon as possible. As soon as you see that problem happening, address it. Don't wait and think, I'm sending all kinds of clues to the student. You need to stop doing that. But I'm not saying the words. And they do pay attention to your nonverbal cues. But remember, power from generational poverty is about win-lose. And it's about likability. Okay? If you can communicate to them in a respectful way, it's not going to be about, she doesn't like me, so I'm not going to do the work. It just escalates. If you can communicate that in a respectful way, it becomes about negotiation. Focus on the behavior and the impact of it, not characters. To say to a student, it's very distracting when you bring those chips in and are eating them because the noise from the paper distracts other people. That's very, very different from saying, that's very rude. You're rude. You're being rude. Okay? That's a characterization. So focus on the behavior and the impact of it. When you rattle that bag, it's disrupting my thought patterns, and I can see that it's distracting some of the students around you. When you chat with this student every day, when you come into class, it's distracting me as the instructor, and it's distracting the students around you. You're not saying you're being rude. You're giving them information. The other part of that is give them examples of appropriate behavior, of professional behavior. It is very professional in this setting to offer your input, and I expect that in class. I expect your perspective on the topic at hand. I expect you to interact with students. Yes, Nina? 5 minutes, okay. But you want to avoid judgment, defensiveness, or excuses. Okay? It's really easy. We all want to be sympathetic. Student comes in, they can give you a long litany of things of why they didn't get there on time, why they have to eat loud food in class. We are not here to lower academic standards. We are not here to make exceptions for inappropriate behavior. Okay? We're here to provide a bridge that helps them understand how to be successful in a different kind of environment. You want to avoid the student feeling sold out. So you want to avoid speculation, stereotypes, opinions, labels, diagnosis. Can you imagine what this little guy's thinking of him and what he's thinking of him? You know, I love that picture because for me, it brings up images of, you know, how we can so quickly go to these things. You know, and we can think, oh, you know, if that guy wasn't behind that glass, he'd be a monster. And, you know, maybe that's true of lions, but, you know, we need to be careful about how we jump to conclusions. So instead of feeling helpless, banning students from class, escalating the behaviors in the gray area, try offering guidance and positive examples. Don't just tell them what they're doing wrong. Give them an example of what appropriate behavior would be. I understand that you have to leave work. They've given you the information. So you say, I understand that you have to leave work and you get here at class and you don't have time to eat between and you need to bring something to class. It would be more appropriate for you and it will increase your chances for success if you bring something that's not going to be so loud. Okay. Communicate your expectations and procedures and reinforce them throughout the semester. Remember, you know, you don't want Tanique sending your travel thing back saying you didn't follow the rules, so you're not going to get your travel money back. Okay? Reinforce that. Reinforce what you expect in your classroom or even in staff settings because they could be getting different messages in different places. We want to teach these hidden rules in a respectful way. And what that means is we are not saying casual register is wrong. We are not saying to use this hidden rule is wrong. We're saying it's not appropriate in this environment. Okay? We don't wear our bathing suits to church. It's not, but does that mean it's always inappropriate to wear a bathing suit? Of course not. You know, you don't wear a suit to the swimming pool. So become a bridging relationship for those students. I think we're out of time. We're not going to do that. So I am going to leave you with these quotes because I love them. Ignorance is a brutal form of oppression. I don't know if Payne and DeVol said that first, but I like it. And you don't know what you don't know. Students don't know what they don't know. And if we expect them to know that knowledge without ever having learned it, and we put them in a situation where they have to know that to succeed, it's tragic. And Vincent Tinto says it this way: access, we're an open access college, anybody can come. Access without support is not opportunity. Access without support is not opportunity. How many times do we say, well, you've got an opportunity, what are you going to do with it? But if you don't have the knowledge you need to succeed in that environment, it's really not opportunity. And then Jack Mesereau is my hero he's the father of transformative learning theory for adult education, helping adults construe experience in a way that they may more clearly understand the reasons for their problems and understand the options open to them so that they may assume responsibility for decision making. If you choose, you are choosing, is the essence of education. It is the very essence of education. It increases a crucial sense of agency over ourselves and our lives. And I love that. Students don't often, they can give you external reasons why they haven't succeeded, but they often don't understand really why they haven't succeeded because they leave and they still don't know those hidden rules. Okay? Think of it this way. I'm assuming no one here is a mega millionaire or even a single millionaire. If you are, I'd like to talk to you afterwards. You're my new best friend. If I took any one of you and I plucked you out and I dropped you into Mitt Romney's world, and I gave you no rules about how they operate, how successful do you think you're going to be? It can be tough. Do you think you're going to be uncomfortable? Do you think you're going to be afraid to ask questions? Do you think you're going to be embarrassed? Do you think that when the folks in that class, when they respond to your questions, they're going to look at you maybe like, how come you don't know that? But you don't know what you don't know. So I just encourage you to kind of adapt this information. Did we pass out this? If you weren't here in the first session, did we pass these out? We didn't. I encourage you, this is some of the differences in the hidden rules of economic class between poverty and middle class and wealth. I encourage you to put it in a plastic sleeve, tape it to your wall, And when you're irritated with students, take that down and look at it. It might reframe your response. Thank you. You've been a fantastic audience.